Today's reading is from Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 17 to 21, chapter 8, verses 17 to 20, and chapter 9, verses 4 to 7. It's 3 chapters, so it's pages 152 and 153 of your church Bibles, but it's also on the inside of your service sheet. You might find that easier. So starting with Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 17. If you say in your heart, these nations are greater than I, how can I dispossess them? You shall not be afraid of them, but you shall remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all Egypt. The great trials that your eyes saw, the signs, the wonders, the mighty hand and the outstretched arm by which the Lord your God brought you out. So will the Lord your God do to all the peoples of whom you are afraid. Moreover, the Lord your God will send hornets among them until those who are left and hide themselves from you are destroyed. You shall not be afraid, you shall not be in dread of them, for the Lord your God is in your midst, a great and awesome God. Chapter 8, verses 17. Beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your fathers, as it is this day. And if you forget the Lord your God and go after other gods and serve them and worship them, I solemnly warn you today that you shall surely perish. Like the nations that the Lord makes to perish before you, so shall you perish, because you would not obey the voice of the Lord your God. Chapter 9, verses 4. Do not say in your heart, after the Lord your God has thrust them out before you, it is because of my righteousness that the Lord has brought me in to possess this land, whereas it is because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is driving them out before you. Not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart are you going in to possess their land, but because of the wickedness of these nations, that Lord your God is driving them out before you, and that he may confirm the word that the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Know therefore that the Lord your God is not giving you this land, this good land, to possess because of your righteousness, for you are a stubborn people. Remember and do not forget how you provoked the Lord your God to wrath in the wilderness. From the day you came out of the land of Egypt until you came to this place, you have been rebellious against the Lord.
Thanks, Cheryl, for reading. And let me add my welcome to John Ace. My name's Andrew, one of the pastors here. And it's excellent to see you all. Hello again if you were at the weekend away last weekend. Welcome back if you weren't there and we saw you a fortnight ago. And a special welcome if you're here for the very first time. And I think there's several brand new people today. So it's lovely to have you. Please don't rush off at the end. We have refreshments and things. I'd love to have a chance to chat at the end. It's our practice at Grace Church to go through whole books of the Bible, week by week, passage by passage, and we're in Deuteronomy at the moment, and we've reached chapter 7, and so that's where we are today. And we come to this theme verse, in fact, one of the most famous verses in the Old Testament of the Bible. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all your soul, and with all of your muchness. All these words I command you today shall be on your heart. That's the central cry of Deuteronomy, that God is the only God, and so God is worth all of our worship. It may be you're here today as a skeptic, maybe you don't believe in God at all, and you certainly don't see why you should be so single-minded in your devotion to God. I gave the illustration of how unreasonable it seems, maybe, this verse, that God should ask for everything, all of our tennis time and all of our cuddly toy time and all of our study time and all of our everything, that seems a bit unreasonable. And I gave the illustration of a previous minister of mine going to a friend's house in the church, and she offered him a slice of cake. Would you like a piece of this cake? And he said to himself, well, actually, I would rather have liked all of it. But I certainly didn't say so. Can you imagine? Would you like a slice of cake? Well, actually, I would like the whole thing, please. He said that would have been extremely rude. So he said, oh, yes, I'll have a slice. But we say to God, would you like a slice of my life, God? And he says, no, thanks. I'd like all of it. And if you're not a Christian, that probably sounds crazy to you. Like, what right does God have to demand everything? But the answer is that God is the creator of everything. He's the giver of everything. He's the one worthy of everything. And it will only make sense if you come to know who God is and what he's done for us. And that in loving him with everything is freedom. But I guess for lots of us here, we're Christians. And the problem for us isn't that we believe in theory that God is worth everything. Yeah, but how do you do that in practice? Right, that's the issue. Because frankly, I don't love the Lord my God with all of my heart. And how can I? That's the question today. And I love this, the graphic that Neil designed. It's just up there. I love this. It's like a fuel tank heart. And the fuel, it's on full at the moment on the graphic, but it probably isn't on full in your life if you're honest about your love of God gauge on the inside. Deuteronomy's got a lot to say about this, and this sermon's going to be all about this. And I'm quite excited about it. When I was preparing Deuteronomy earlier in the year, this was probably the sermon that most challenged me and had most that surprised me to say. So it's all about how to do it. Love the Lord with all your heart. Okay, but how? How do I maintain a healthy heart? I know that sounds like the sort of thing that your doctor would nag you about, and it's, fewer steaks and whatever. Don't worry, this isn't going to be a lecture about dietary. You can eat as many steaks as you like, as far as I'm concerned. But this is about how to take care of your heart spiritually. The heart is in the Bible, the center of our will, the center of our intellect, the center of our desiring. How do I love God with the bit in me that loves things, basically? I mean, we used to say, my dear, don't we, even today? We know that the heart pumps blood and doesn't have much to do with emotions, but Valentine's Day cards still have hearts on them. And it's the same idiom. How do I love God with the bit of me that desires and thinks about and is motivated to and wants to do stuff? How do I put him at the center of my being? Well, point one is very short, and then point two will be a bit longer. Point one is to love God with all your heart. You've got to fill your heart with truth about him. You've got to fill your heart with his words. So lies stop us loving God. And all the way through the history of the Bible, lies have stopped human beings loving God. Things like God just wants to enslave you. God's laws are burdensome to you. You'd be much better throwing off the shackles of Christian ethics and enjoying yourself. That's basically what our culture says, isn't it? Like, who would want to save sex only for marriage? How boring. Wouldn't it be much better to discard these Christian ethics and sleep with whoever you want? That's a lie in our culture. I remember when I was at university as a non-Christian, I kind of used to pity Christians and envy the people that slept around. The people who had loads of different partners. I thought, oh, they're really having a good time. The Christians who are celebrating until marriage, how sad. And then sort of 30 years on, I realized it's the other way around. The people who slept with whoever they want hurt themselves and hurt other people a lot. And the Christians that I pitied, who saved themselves for a permanent marriage relationship, are secure and happy. And I thought, oh, yeah, I got that wrong. But it's a lie, isn't it, that the secular world tells us. So we got to displace lies with the truth. And the more we understand about how good God is and how good his ways are, the easier it will be to love him. So back in chapter 6 of Deuteronomy, this is revision really, but Moses said this: "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart." That's the key. So you love the Lord with all your heart. How? By putting these words on your heart. He says, you shall teach them diligently to your children. And I love reading verse 7 at the same time as 3 floors down in this building, our children are being taught these words diligently. I love that. So that's what Moses says. The whole of God's people need this, from the oldest to the youngest. Teach them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house. Do you do that? Is the Bible just for Sundays, or do you chat about it at home, the kitchen? And when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you get up. It's great, isn't it? Bedtime, when you wake up in the morning, when you go for a walk, when you're in the house, all the time you're talking about it. You shall bind them as a sign in your hand. They shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house. So if you were to actually try that, do Bible graffiti on your doorpost, but try it. But the point is, have God's words just everywhere in your life. Because if our life is only fueled by, if the only inputs into our life are Netflix, Amazon Prime, YouTube, TikTok, I mean, some of that is Christian. There are Christians on those platforms, but not very much of it is Christian. Mostly it's lies. And so don't be surprised if, believing those lies, you love God less. And the way to love God more is to fill your mind with truth. One of the ways that the Bible encourages us to do it is to meditate on God's words. So Psalm 1 talks about the man who meditates on God's law day and night, the blessed man. I remember when I was at Bible college, one of my tutors, a guy called Mike Ovey in systematic theology, he used to say, meditation is not this. And he said, it's not sitting with your legs crossed. I can't actually do that because it's going to hurt. But it's not sitting with your legs crossed, unscrewing tiny light bulbs. I love that image. Yeah. He said that's not meditation in the Bible. In the Bible, meditation is filling your mind with God's words. And I never really understood this until last year, actually. You know how it says in the Bible that God's words mustn't depart from our mouth? What does that mean? To meditate on God's words means that God's words don't depart from your mouth. I think it means that the way to meditate is you're saying God's words. They're in your mouth. You're saying them over and over again. And it might be that you read scripture to yourself aloud. It might be that you try to memorize verses of the Bible and you say them to yourself. But there's something about your lips moving and your mouth containing them that puts them back into your head. So that's the first bit. How do you love the Lord with all your heart? Well, fill your heart with God's words. I don't know if you noticed our psalm. Could we have the slide for our responsive reading back on the screen? We had Psalm 103 just before this, bit before that. Yeah, that one. Yeah. Songs in the Bible are kind of different sometimes to songs that we sing elsewhere in life. My question about this song, one of the psalms, is who are you singing to? Who were you speaking to when you said these words? Just have a look and see if you can work it out. So sometimes psalms are addressed to God, praising him. Sometimes psalms are addressed to other Christians, encouraging them. Who's this one addressed to? Yourself. Yeah. You were speaking out loud to yourself. And I know lots of us were doing it in the same room, so maybe we thought we were speaking to each other. But first and foremost, the person that needed to hear those words from your lips was you. Now, I want to encourage this. I don't know whether you talk to yourself at home. I talk to my dog quite a lot, partly because he always agrees with me. At least if there's a biscuit in my hand, he agrees with me, whatever I say. And that's he never answers back. But people think you're crazy if you talk. But the Christians should be speaking to themselves about God's truth. Say it over and over and over to yourself. One of the most influential books probably in the last 100 years of Christian discipleship, was a book called Spiritual Depression by a then famous preacher called Martin Lloyd-Jones. This is 80 years ago, so a long time ago. But he writes this book about how sometimes Christians, we can get downhearted, we can get discouraged, we can get our mindset a bit off track. And he says what we need to do is to start talking to ourselves. And he's actually meditating not on Psalm 103, but on another psalm like it, Psalm 42. It's the same idea, talking to yourself. And he says this: have you realized that most of your unhappiness in life is due to the fact that you're listening to yourself instead of talking to yourself? Take those thoughts that come to you in the moment you wake up in the morning. You haven't originated them, but they're talking to you. They bring back the problems of yesterday, etc. Someone is talking. Who is talking to you? Yourself is talking to you. Now, this man's treatment in Psalm 42 was this: instead of allowing this self to talk to him, he starts talking to himself. Why are you cast down, my soul? He asked. His soul had been depressing him, crushing him. So he stands up and says, self, listen for a moment. I want to talk to you. That's what Deuteronomy is encouraging. These words in our hearts, these words not departing from our mouth, these words addressed to ourselves. Now, some of you are thinking, Andrew, where does this come from in our passage? Because we go through the Bible week by week, passage by passage, and we're quite scrupulous in making sure that we try and say what the passage says. Well, I hope you can look down in bold at the three readings. You'll see this is exactly the theme, actually. Do not say in your heart. Deuteronomy 7, verse 17. Beware lest you say in your heart. Deuteronomy 8:17. Do not say in your heart. Deuteronomy 9, verse 4. And I was just excited by this. I'd not really thought about this before. And I just kept seeing it again and again through Deuteronomy, that God doesn't only care about what we do. There is a lot of stuff in Deuteronomy about what we do, living a godly life in line with his commandments. There's something about that. It's not just about what we say to other people. There is stuff in Deuteronomy about that. But it's also about what we say inside our head to ourselves. Now, I don't know whether you've ever kind of thought about this before, that God cares about your internal narrative, your internal monologue, the things that, whether or not you talk out loud to yourself or whether it's just thoughts in your head, but either way, what is playing in here, God cares about it. And actually, to control what is playing in here is part of the way that we'll be able to love him with all of our heart. It's an invitation to self-censor sometimes. There's a thought that pops into your head and you say, no, Andrew, we're not spending time thinking about that in our head today. You disallow your head, your heart, from saying things. And then you replace them with other things. Instead, Andrew, we're going to think about this today. Now, maybe this sounds kind of crazy to you. It's actually, modern psychology has discovered this. It's actually right at the heart of good mental health. So the most effective treatment for many mental conditions at the moment in psychology is cognitive behavioral therapy. It's not the only treatment. And sometimes people need to take medicines to help them with brain chemistry. And if you're suffering from serious depression, there's absolutely no shame in going to see a GP about it, and I'd recommend that. Sometimes medicine's required. But one of the ways that psychologists most help people nowadays is by what they call cognitive behavioral therapy. And what it means is that you change your behavior so that it changes your thoughts, and you change your thoughts so that it changes your behavior. And that just tells me that about, how long will it be? About 3,500 years later, modern psychology catches up with the Bible. And it's a good thing that we realize that, but the Bible already knows that. What we think about, what gets airtime in our head, really does shape what we love. So Deuteronomy says, well, fill your heart with what's true. And then point 2, and we're going to look at these specific examples. Empty your heart of what is not true. Empty your heart of lies. And there are 3 things here in Deuteronomy that we're told not to think. It's interesting, isn't it? Even in the 10 Commandments, there's commandments about what you do or what you don't do. So don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't murder, But there's also commands about what to think. The 10th commandment, do not covet. Covet's not an action, covet's a thought. God cares about what we think. And he says this to us, don't say in your heart, 3 things not to say. Don't say in your heart, I'm paraphrasing, I don't think I can do it. It's too much for me. I'm daunted by it. I can't cope. Don't say that. Now, I'm not wanting to apply this in a sort of self-help way to any single thing you want to do in your life, because there will be preachers on the internet that will apply this to everything. So, here are you trying to make your business work. You can do it in the name of the Lord. You can make your business flourish. I'm not saying that. There's no guarantee in the Bible that all businesses run by Christians will work. I'm not saying that. Or I'm not saying that you will be able to win the London Marathon next time round. You can do it. Don't doubt it. There are sermons on the internet like that. I'm not saying that. There's a specific context here, right? So this is God's people on the edge of the promised land, daunted by the enemies they're about to face as they cross the border. And in that context, they're told, you can do it. So look at chapter 7, verse 17. If you say in your heart, these nations are greater than I, how can I dispossess them? You shall not be afraid of them. You shall remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh, to all of Egypt, the great trials your eyes saw, the signs, the wonders, the mighty hand, and the outstretched arm by which the Lord your God brought you out. So will the Lord your God do to all the peoples of whom you are afraid. This is about the conquest of the promised land. And I've been trying to explain during this series in Deuteronomy, this isn't about battles in modern day Israel, Gaza, Palestine. We're not to apply it in that way to the 21st century bit of geography in the Middle East. But as we come into the New Testament, the New Testament writers apply this conquest of the promised land to our ultimate future in the kingdom of heaven. How will we get from here in this sinful world across the finish line into a new heaven and a new earth? And there's a lot of obstacles to that. There are enemies to that. There are demonic forces opposed to that. And maybe you're feeling, it's not just I want my business to flourish, or I want to win the marathon, but I just want to stay Christian and cross the finish line. All of the battles of evil in this world, with temptation, with opposition from your family, with a culture that is increasingly secular. Will I make it into the promised land, you're thinking? Not meaning a bit of the Middle East, but meaning the new creation, the new heavens and the new earth. Will I cross the border? And God's saying, don't be intimidated by that. Don't say, I can't do it. In a sense, well, obviously you can't. Which of us could defeat all of the powers of evil? And that's not the point. The answer is, don't say you can't do it, because God says, I can do it. I did it. Remember the Exodus. Remember the plagues on Pharaoh. Remember the waters of the Red Sea parted. Remember that. And look ahead, I'm going to do the same again. We can look ahead in the Bible story and think of the defeat of Jericho. We can think of the battle with God's enemies, the Philistines. Again and again, God fights for them. Verse 21, don't be in dread of them. The Lord your God is in your midst, a great and awesome God. So the question is not whether you can do it, but whether God can and whether he's good. And he is good, and he can. And of course, they can look back at the Exodus. We can look back even more than that. We can look back at Jesus and his death on the cross, his resurrection from the dead, his victory over Satan, the powers of darkness, the growth of his church over the last 2,000 years. Sure, there's battles for the church in the West right now, but what? 1 billion people around the world think that Jesus is Lord. And in the first century, there were 11 of them? It's done pretty well, the church, and God can't be stopped. So don't be daunted. Now, I don't know which of these applies to you, but there will be people here today who feel daunted about the Christian life. And you don't know whether you can make it. Maybe you're worried about family members. Maybe you're worried about your own battle with temptation. Maybe you're scared. And God says, don't be scared. Well, in fact, it's not quite don't be scared, but don't be scared of that. Just fear God instead. He is an awesome God. He's much more powerful than the things that you're scared of. So fear only him. If you say in your heart, these nations are greater than I, how can I conquer them? You shall not be afraid of them, but you shall remember what the Lord your God did. Now, this really is a very practical sermon. I don't want you to go, oh yeah, okay, I understand the concept. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Point 2A, I get it on the handout. No, I want you to do this. So at the point in your life when you think, I am daunted, do not say this in your heart, but instead say, oh, I remember what the Lord did. So it's natural action. You're going to have to displace some thoughts in your head this week with other thoughts in your head. Displace the I can't do it thought with the God is very powerful and has a very powerful track record to save people thought. But then the other one, I love how it's very realistic, isn't it, the Bible? It knows us well. There's the person who's daunted, and maybe that's you today in church. There's also the person who's cocky. And the Bible isn't just, oh, don't worry, it's going to be okay to the daunted. It's also, don't be so full of yourself to the cocky. So straight into chapter 8, verse 17, beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. Again, this isn't saying all Christians will be rich. It's talking about the conquest of the promised land. It's talking about being in the land of milk and honey. But when you enjoy the blessings of being Christian, don't say, oh, I've done it for myself. No, you haven't. It's the irony, isn't it, that we can be, I think I can be both daunted and cocky in the space of like a week. So, I mean, at the moment, I'm daunted I'm doing a big teaching day on Tuesday on Galatians, and I'm, to be honest, quite scared about it. I'm doing a conference, and it's sort of 5 hours of lectures, and I'm feeling very worried about it, and I'm praying in a daunted way, Lord, I'm not up to this. And who knows how it'll go. But if it goes well on Tuesday, I bet you on Wednesday I'll be cocky. Oh, I'm pretty good at Galatians. Look at me. I mean, it's absurd, isn't it? But we can do that. And so point 2, beware lest you say in your heart, my power has achieved this. Of course not. Do you not realize that all that you have, all that I have, comes from God and his mercy to us? His salvation on our behalf. And the trouble with when we say, I did it, is we quickly start to turn away from God and go after other things. You shall remember the Lord your God. It is he who gives you power to get wealth. It was him who confirmed his covenant that he swore to our fathers. And if you forget the Lord, well, be careful. Do you see this command in the first one? If you say in your heart, these nations are greater than I, you shall remember what the Lord did. The second one, beware lest you're cocky, you shall remember what the Lord did. That's the key. How am I going to remember what the Lord did? Well, I've got to put his words back in my head. Because the BBC is not going to tell me everything that you have comes from God. It will give me examples of humans triumphing based on their own amazing efforts. And I think, oh, I've also triumphed because of my amazing efforts. But if you read the Bible, it will tell it not because of your amazing efforts, but because of the Lord. Like, this is the only place you're going to get the right perspective. My favorite, I think John Piper speaks about defeater verses. Like if you've got a particular battle with temptation, the verse that you can say in your head that slays a particular temptation. And my favorite one on pride is from 1 Corinthians, and it goes like this. What do you have that you did not receive? And if you received it, why do you boast as though you did not? Such a good verse, isn't it? Like, I mean, people have got different gifts here. You know, like I can play the piano a bit. How come I can play the piano a bit? Because my parents spent an absolute fortune on piano lessons, even when I sometimes didn't practice. So don't boast you can play the piano a bit, Andrew. Be thankful to your parents and to your piano teacher. It's that kind of idea. But with everything, you know, don't boast that you can, whatever you can do well, when it's something that's given to you from God. Beware lest you say in your heart, my power has achieved it. And then finally, do not say in your heart, look at how impressed God is with me. This is a kind of variation on the second one. It's not saying, look what I've achieved. It says, okay, I admit that it was God that achieved it, but God must have achieved it because he was chuffed with me. Okay, so yeah, God made me good at the piano. I realize that's from God because he made me good at the piano because he's so pleased with how good I am. No, not even that. God did it, and God did it not because we were good enough to deserve it. Look at the last one, verse 4. Don't say in your heart, after the Lord your God has thrust them out before you, it is because of my righteousness that the Lord has brought me in to possess the land. Whereas it's because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is driving them out before you. So the conquest of Jericho, for example, when the Israelites conquered Jericho, it wasn't because Israelites were brilliant, it's because people in Jericho were evil. And God was bringing judgment on the Canaanites. Verse 5, not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart are you going in to possess their land, but because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord your God is driving out from before you, and that he may confirm the word that the Lord spoke to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Verse 6, know therefore that the Lord your God is not giving you this good land. I love it, he just says it 3 times. He's not giving it to you because of your righteousness, because you are a stubborn people. It's so frank, isn't it? God says to us, I didn't save you because you were good, because frankly, you're stubborn. God's not into flattery, is he? He didn't have mercy on us because we deserved it. He had mercy on us despite that we're very, very slow to turn to his ways out of his own mercy. And then again, this warning, verse 7, remember and do not forget. Don't push God too far, how you provoked the Lord to wrath in the wilderness. Remember, you have been rebellious until this day. How are you going to remember? Well, you see, we need good mental hygiene or good cardiac hygiene. I'm not talking about eating less steaks, but eating less lies. Yeah, keep the lies out of your head. And you can't really stop, unless you live in some sort of desert monastery bubble. I'm not recommending that, but you can't stop being sort of lies are piped into us all the time by the media and by our culture. You can't stop that, but you can decide not to give them airtime in your head. That's the point. Don't say in your heart. As a pastor, as a church leader, when I'm trying to help people who are struggling, usually it's exactly this. They say I'm struggling because of X, and then I say, no, X is not true. Listen to Y. And I try to displace the thing that they're believing that's false with something that's true. And you probably do that to your friends. If you're a Christian and you've got friends who are struggling, I bet you do the same to them. So you take a promise from Scripture and you speak it. And they say, like, I feel worthless. You're not worthless. The Lord God made you in his image. He loved you. He sent his son to die for you. You find Christian truth to encourage them. I don't know whether you do the other way around. Stop being so cocky. You're actually stubborn. And everything that you have came from God, even though you didn't deserve it. So get off your high perch. Maybe we should say that to each other as well. But we speak truth into people's lives to contradict the lies that they already believe. It's a sort of form of Christian CBT. It happens in churches all the time. But this passage says we've got to take responsibility for doing that for ourselves as well. Of course, we need each other. We should do that. But in your own head, check your thoughts. Is this something in my heart that is true? Or is this something that I need to stop thinking? And in each case, we have to stop thinking by remembering something else. That's the way that Moses tells him to do it. If you say in your heart, I don't think I can do it, remember that God is awesome and powerful, If you say in your heart, oh, look what I've achieved, remember, it was God who gave you everything that you have. If you say in your heart, oh, he gave me everything I have because I'm so good, remember that actually you're so stubborn. It's one of the reasons it's so good to start with the confession every Sunday, isn't it? We just remind ourselves, oh, look at us at Grace Church Greenwich. We're such great people. God said, no, here we are at Grace Church Greenwich, sinners, needing the forgiveness that comes from Jesus Christ. And everything that we enjoy from him comes on the basis of his grace. And we need to keep saying it. And to be honest, a sermon on it once every, I've never preached this before. I preached it at Canada Water and Eltham. I've never preached this before at Greenwich. And how often does this come around in the Bible? I don't know, once every 5 years. That isn't going to be enough. In fact, sermons every Sunday aren't going to be enough. In fact, sermons on Sundays and even grace groups, if you come midweek on a Wednesday, aren't going to be enough. You're going to have to do this every day. You've got to become a preacher of your own sermons to yourself. And it's a really good thing to do. Wake up in the morning, preach a sermon to yourself. It doesn't have to be long. It can be shorter than this one. But say something true to yourself from the scriptures. And when you catch yourself saying something untrue to yourself, say, shush. Andrew, no, we're not going to think about that. You don't have to give yourself permission to think of things that are lies. You can silence them and displace them with what's true. I hope you found this helpful. I find this such a profound thing, this streak in Deuteronomy. Do not say in your heart. And I've done my best to try and explain why it's exciting. But why don't we do it now? So we're going to we always leave a pause after the sermon. And sometimes you just think, oh, this is just, I have to wait for the prayer. But why not actually use the pause? I think, is it Fiona? You're leading us in prayer. Where have you gone? Yeah. Can you give us like a couple of minutes? 2 minutes seems like a really long time when you're on your own. But I want us to give us some time in our heart right now to say some true things to yourself. And then why not do the same thing tomorrow and on Tuesday and on Wednesday and so on. Thanks so much.